Welcome to Economics 101. This is Ian Hodge, and today's lesson is what economics is all about. People often get confused and think that economics is to do with very complex financial transactions, and it eventually comes to that because it's part of the explanation of what I call just simple buying and selling. And it's in the buying and selling transactions that we see and understand our grassroots understanding, or we obtain our grassroots understanding of economics. So here today we have somebody selling apples. And in order for somebody to sell apples, we're going to find something unique. In order for that person to sell apples, there's going to have to be a buyer of apples as well. Because unless somebody wants to buy what somebody is selling, then no transaction takes place, no buying or selling takes place. So we see here that I've set up a selling section on the left hand side of the screen, buying on the right hand side of the screen, and now we're going to figure out what the seller is actually selling is apples, as we indicate there. And here I'm going to draw some apples. Well, I'm going to draw one apple and then I'm going to copy it. That'll be a little easier. So there's our apple. One apple. Two apples. Three apples. Four apples, and then 5 apples. That's what our seller is trying to sell. 5 apples. It just so happens that on today's market, there's a buyer who wants to buy exactly those same 5 apples. Now you notice I'm using the word buyer and seller in relationship to the particular product that we're talking about here, which is apples. Somebody is selling apples, and that is they want to get rid of apples, and somebody wants to receive apples. The person who's receiving the apples we refer to as the buyer. The person who's selling the apples we refer to as the seller, of course. He's the one who says, hey, I've got some apples here, I want to get rid of them because I want something else. Perhaps I've produced too many apples and I'm tired of eating apples. I want something else. So I'm going to sell my apples and get something else in exchange. Well, our buyer, though, in order to be able to secure those apples, has to be able to offer the seller something that the seller wants. In this case, our buyer is offering tomatoes. Or depending which part of the world you're in, it's tomatoes. I'm Australian, so I can say tomatoes, or when I'm in America I can say tomatoes. And now we're going to put some little leaves, green leaves out on the stem, just to make sure we can tell the difference between a tomato and an apple. Well, of course anyone can tell the difference once you see them in real life, but I haven't got real life photographs here. I'm doing a little artistic sketching as I'm explaining what buying and selling is. So here we have our buyer is offering the seller tomatoes. In fact, we'll find that the interesting thing is he's going to offer 5 tomatoes for those 5 apples. Now, if we were going to develop price theory from here, we would end up saying that 1 apple has the price of 1 tomato. Or we could say 1 tomato has the price of 1 apple. That is today's price in this transaction. Tomorrow, of course, it may be different. Maybe somebody would only offer 4 tomatoes for 5 apples, in which case the price has changed. But we'll come to price theory in another video clip. Here I'm trying to make sure that we understand the simplistic world of economics. Buying and selling. having something that somebody wants in exchange for something else. And it just so happens today that our seller is happy to take 5 tomatoes for his 5 apples. Well, now, if we look at these two people in relationship to tomatoes, we find that one of these people is getting rid of tomatoes, that is, he's selling tomatoes, and the other one is receiving tomatoes, that is, he's buying tomatoes. So when we use words like buying and selling, we can actually interchange, and we find that anyone who is selling is at the same time also buying. And anyone who is buying is also at the same time selling. We just have to stop and think about which economic product is going in which direction. When we're getting rid of something, we're selling. When we're receiving something, we're buying. And of course, what you find, of course, is that in order for any kind of trading to take place, whoops, the eye didn't come out there very well. When we are trading or we're exchanging, two people are both buyers and sellers. They are exchanging goods and services, or in this case goods, for some other type of good. But you know, sometimes when you come to do a transaction like this, you'll find that the person who's selling the apples doesn't want tomatoes. He actually wants something else. And so our buyer has to go look and see what he has available, because in this case the seller is saying, no, I don't want tomatoes. What else have you got to offer me? Well, the buyer sits there and scratches his head for a little while and says, I actually have some gold. I don't know whether you want gold, Mr. Seller, but I've got these little gold bars that are 1/10 of an ounce of gold, and I would happily exchange those for your apples. Well, the seller says to himself, gold. I can't eat gold. I can't get nourishment out of gold. But I know somebody else down the street who will take my gold and give me something else that I want. In other words, he knows that a product like gold is readily exchangeable with somebody else. And that easy exchangeability, or that ready exchangeability, is how we come to determine which economic good is going to be called money. There's our 1 ounce, or 0.1 of an ounce. So here I am just sketching out the gold bars on the screen here so that we can visualize and see exactly how this transaction is going to transpire, not with tomatoes now, but with gold bars that are each 1/10 of an ounce. So now if we were talking about the price of the apples, before we said an apple was worth 1 tomato, well, now we can say that an apple is worth 1/10 of an ounce of gold. So you see what price is? Price is a relationship between two economic goods. Doesn't have to be edible goods such as apples and tomatoes or apples and oranges, but it can be in a ratio between goods on one hand and another economic good that has a special place in the community called money. And so in this case, the seller says, yep, I'm happy to take those 1/10 of an ounce bars of gold in exchange for my 5 apples. So as long as our buyer and our seller can now agree on the trading or exchanging terms, we are going to have a transaction, and somebody, the seller, is going to put a big sign up on his apple box which says, going to say sold. In this case, I've sold 5 apples for 5 bars of gold, each one 1/10 of an ounce. So I've got half an ounce of gold in total for my 5 apples. If you understand this, you understand almost everything you need to understand in principle in economics. And all we're going to see in our later courses is that we're going to take this transaction and explode it out in different patterns and different formats, so that under different circumstances some of the principles work themselves out slightly differently.